All right, looks like we are live. Sorry about that, folks. Good evening and welcome to everyone tuning in to this event on the global climate crisis, hosted by the International Marxist Tendency. My name is Simone and I'm a member of the Madison branch of the IMT. We are a growing revolutionary organization of workers and youth actively involved in the fight for socialism in 70 cities across the US and in sections around the world. You can learn more about the IMT and how to get involved at the website of our national section, socialistrevolution.org, or at marxist.com, our international site. Both regularly publish articles and other resources on current events, history, and theory from a Marxist perspective. For local events and activities, or to talk with comrades here in Madison, please reach out to us by visiting our branch's website, imtmadison.org, and join our email list for updates on the class struggle as it unfolds here in the US and around the world. If you're not already receiving the official paper of our national section, we encourage you to subscribe to Socialist Revolution, which you can do by contacting our branch directly or by visiting socialistrevolution.org. And finally, this work is entirely funded by members and supporters of the IMT. If you want to help build the forces of Marxism, you can donate via Venmo to Ivy Gertz, and that name should appear below on screen. Our event tonight consists of two parts. First, our speaker, Liam, will provide a short introduction to the topic during the live stream portion of the event, which is being broadcast now on Facebook and YouTube. And afterwards, we invite you to join us on Zoom for an informal discussion. The Zoom link will be posted in the comments at the end of the stream, but during, please feel free to post your thoughts or questions in the comment section, and we can discuss them later on. And so for tonight's topic, we're talking about climate change, one of the greatest existential threats to life on this planet. And what can be done to solve this global crisis from a Marxist perspective. Here to discuss all this and the socialist way forward is another comrade from our Madison branch, Liam, and I will turn it now over to him.
Thank you, Simone, for that introduction, and thank you all for being here. I'm really excited to talk about this topic because it's very important, as Simone mentioned. This is do or die for the future of our species, for future of life on planet. You know, here at the, we've been saying for a while, the climate crisis is an existential threat to humanity and the future of our species, future of life on the planet Earth and beyond, right? And capitalism has been responsible for creating the incentives and the structures that have brought about this crisis in the first place. And there's no way out of this crisis through capitalism. Only through revolutionary transformation of society, to form a democratic, rational plan of production, can we actually surmount the massive challenge to overcome this crisis that is not in the future, right? It's already here. The crisis of climate change is already here. All around the world, we're experiencing floods, heat waves, tsunamis, you know, the ways of entire people's cities with tens of millions of people are having crises all the time. Already it's costing a ton of money and people's lives are being destroyed. And in the future, it's just going to continue to get worse. And this will form an existential threat to our ability to continue to live on the planet, to continue to have a society at all, right? The climate change crisis is a do or die in a way that few other crises are, but I think it illustrates really clearly this question, this impetus in the importance of this just transformation, the socialist transformation of society. So if we really look at it, we can see pretty clearly that the structures of capitalism in a lot of ways are responsible for bringing us climate change, right? We have industrial production, we have war on an imperial scale all over the world. We have, you know, just a few massive corporations and militaries pumping out enormous amounts of pollution, and all the decisions around this production, around this pollution, are made behind closed doors by a small group of people, not on the basis of what is good for society as a whole, but on the basis of short-term corporate profits for a very small class of people that doesn't include almost everybody. So, you know, and a lot of these people are not necessarily they're making these decisions aren't necessarily doing it because they hate the planet, right? It's the natural outcome of a profit-based system is to make these kinds of decisions wherein everybody winds up losing. And just to put this in perspective, right, the actual scale of this problem that we're dealing with is absolutely enormous. The amount of resources and the scale of the transformation and in our transportation and housing and production and all of these things is incredibly radical, right? It's not really within the limits of anything that we can think about even being close to being done in the capitalist system. According to the IPCC report, the one that said that we need to reduce our emissions quite a bit, right? Emissions, but to stay under the 1.5 degrees Celsius, which if we don't, very, very bad things will happen. So emissions would need to be reduced 45% by 2030 and to net zero by 2050. And this is estimated to cost all in all over $2 trillion a year. Which is a lot of money and a lot less than is being invested right now, right? But all the technology to achieve this transition already exists. It's already out there. The only issue is that capitalism can provide neither the planning nor the resources to actually get this done. Capitalists aren't going to invest in something unless it's profitable. The fossil fuel, the energy companies, if something isn't profitable, isn't going to grow the money for the shareholders. And we're seeing now that climate change, even in the capitalist projections, is becoming very, very costly. But the only thing is, it's not a good enough mechanism, right? If they're just doing it to avoid some short-term problem, that's what they're going to be worried about, and ultimately that's what they're going to do. They're not actually going to take the steps that are needed to neutralize the negative effects of this as much as possible, because there's quite a bit that needs to be done. And the market incentives that led to all this, the deception for years that climate change was known about, and they were lied to the public, right? But the issue and the lobbying, the manipulating the government's part of the reason why this politically it's still very difficult to get any kind of climate change remediation passed, right? There's so much pressure, and ultimately it's this profit motive that's driving all of this. The wealth already exists to deal with this. It's just a matter of who pays, who benefits from the conditions that cause this, and who has to deal with the consequences, right? This is not just a matter of everybody contributing to a little bit. There is a class that benefits from this, there's a class that causes it, and there's a class that has to pay for it. And fundamentally, and a lot of people are. There's been a lot of talk, very positive talk about the incoming administration, a lot of actions that they're doing, people seem to be pretty hopeful about. But we have to remember that even the Democrats and Biden are ultimately responsible to American capital. Any administration that comes in is going to be the same in that matter. And that the actions that are taken, while some of them that may be individually positive, they're merely token gestures in the face of the enormity of this crisis, right? Revoking the license of Keystone XL, while there are 20 other oil pipelines running across, and where the construction continues across the U.S. is it's a drop in the bucket. It's not nearly enough. They talk about the Paris Climate Agreement and applauding that, but ultimately it constitutes a symbolic gesture against the enormous size of this crisis. It's non-binding, and it would need to be 80% more ambitious just to meet those goals that I was talking about. Well, to meet the below 2 Celsius levels. So which is, by the time we're getting to 2 Celsius, it's very dangerous. And so Biden unveiled this new climate plan, and which lays out about $282 billion all in all over the next decade. But as we talked about, that is not going to be nearly enough. We would need that much every year, right? And it would need to be matched by governments all over the world. And if it gets passed at all, right, it'll probably things will be cut, and it will be much reduced in a form that's much more, beneficial to the capitalists. So, and this kind of brings up another point, right, is that this is truly a global issue. And it's one on such a scale that global coordination from people all over the world, right, from the entire planet will be needed to do this. And the current structure of nation states and under capitalism is really not set up to do this, right? We have these summits with these non-binding resolutions that ultimately wind up being kind of feckless because they can't actually enforce the provisions. There's not anything on the line there. And we have these states that are just, these nation states that are, a lot of them are going into this, right, thinking we're prioritizing the climate crisis, not necessarily as an issue that affects everybody, right, and is going to make life difficult for everybody, but thinking about their own interests and thinking about those is like being somewhat adversarial or oppositional to the other countries' interests. That's typically the way that a lot of things are thought about in modern international relations and diplomacy. But if you take that mindset to climate change, then everybody is in trouble, right? Because if the countries are continuing to work against each other and saying, like, for example, like in terms of research, right? All of the scientists all over the world, instead of hoarding research and trying to make the most money or the most power off of it, we could be collaborating on a mass scale, like coming up with plans of production to transform society in a way that we can actually remediate and neutralize this, so that we can continue to live on the planet indefinitely, right? But this is not possible under the capitalist system, not on a national level and not on an international level. And even if it was on a national level, that wouldn't be enough because of just the sheer scale of the crisis. So we see in many ways that the crisis is a byproduct of the system, and we need to address the root cause of climate change with urgency, because just the mass enormity of how big of a deal it is and the impact that it's going to have on everybody's life on the planet. Even just, it's one of those things. It's really sad to think about, because it's not just humanity. It's not just our society that's being impacted at this, but it's like the whole future of life as we know it. So it really should be a big deal for just about all of us. And if it was just this issue, right? If this was the only reason to be a socialist, then it would be enough. Of course, it's not. There are many very good reasons to be a socialist, but this one on its own would be enough, because this issue illustrates better than almost any other one I can think of, but there's quite a few that are up there, just how important this transformation of society is, because there is no conceivable way that this transition that needs to happen for the continued survival of all of us can happen under capitalism. So the struggle to deal with the climate crisis, the climate struggle is intertwined, is the class struggle, right? They're one and the same. And it's been very encouraging, especially the past few years. We've seen this huge upsurge in people taking to the streets and demanding climate action. There's so much energy behind this. We saw like that particular upsurge in 2019. A lot of groups out there, and when and there's a whole movement around Greta Thunberg and a lot of activism going on around that. And it's great to see so much issue and people rightly recognizing the importance of this issue. And these student protests and street strikes are powerful. They can be powerful, and they definitely show a lot of energy around this issue, but they're not enough, right? They haven't actually made this change. We're still not where we need to be in terms of climate action, right? We actually need to be able to flex the power. And in order to do that, the climate activists need to link up with the organized working class and fight for radical political change, not just to appeal to the current status quo, but to actually demand that we change that status quo, and to link up to other groups that are doing the same, recognizing how all these issues are connected. It's not just this one problem, right? It's connected to all of these other issues that are going on in society, and it's only by linking up with that struggle as a class struggle that we'll be able to actually affect that kind of change. Really, just it's kind of like being able to Marxism. I find is really good for getting a perspective on a situation, and when it comes to events, being able to put them through a lens where you can find the points where you can have the most impact, quite possibly, by your observation of the situation. And that's kind of what we're thinking about when we're thinking about things in terms of class struggle, is because the class struggle is such a decisive element of how we got to where we are and where we are going in the future. So there's which I think we've seen, like, in the 1 second. I'm gonna. Hey everybody! I hope everyone is having a good evening. Let's see. So the approach of taking to the streets and that amount of energy is very encouraging, and it's a lot better than kind of the more individualistic approaches that we have seen in the past. Things that are like demanding on, like, oh, you drive an SUV, therefore you are the reason for climate change, right? We're going a little bit deeper than that, but still, in order for this movement to ultimately be successful, to meet its goals, we need that clearness of purpose and the clarity of analysis and of action in concert with that to actually accomplish our goal. And I think that illustrates it pretty well. But however, a lot of the current policy is still lagging very far behind, and people see that, right? The idea of, people need to make sacrifices while the major corporations are still burning all kinds of fossil fuels and making no effort to change, and burning most of the fossil fuels, and people are being shamed for not doing as much as some other people can under very limited circumstances. And we have, I watched a video recently, and I'd seen part of it floating around. It's Bill Nye lighting a globe on fire and saying, "This is what's happening to the planet. The planet is on fire. Why can't you understand this? We need a carbon tax. We need to tax people so that we can incentivize them to use less carbon so that climate change gets better." And it's like, well, if the world is on fire, then this kind of solution, which has been tried before, and it's marginal, it's limited, it just works around the edges, it doesn't actually touch the core issue, and it winds up affecting people who are affected by it more than actually cause it. It winds up the burden of it being put on households, and it winds up being another austerity measure. If we're really serious about climate change, we need to take radical action and think about the way that our society is structured, and actually come up with a plan of production that we all can be a part of, that's democratic, that is rational, that actually addresses things based on human need rather than just private profit. So it so and I think we also have to think about this too, that climate change is not just something that automatically happens because we have a certain level of technology or industrialization, right? It's not actually caused by the technology itself, but it's caused by the way that production and society is organized around that, right, under capitalism, and that it motivates waste, right? There's not that accountability there. Economic growth isn't the problem itself. The problem isn't that there are too many people. The problem is that the profit motive is what drives production and plans our whole society, rather than human need and continuing our life on this planet. And here we see kind of a flaw with concepts like degrowth and zero growth that have started to kind of float around a lot more recently. And there's a problem with that, is that what we're thinking about, growth isn't actually the issue. We're taking focus away from the core issue, which is the kind of the class rule, the composition, how our society is structured, and putting it on this simple thing, growth, without actually changing that, right? Who is going to wind up paying for that scaling back of growth? It is the people like you and me and the workers, and not the people who continue to own and have all of the power in society. So like climate change really illustrates well the limits and the drawbacks of not having democratic control of production, and the changes that we could do, right? The absolute importance of having this. We don't just need like acts or taxes, specific tweaks around the edges. What we need is a systemic international change. And like ultimately, we're not saying that technology is bad, but it's private ownership that has created this situation that we see. It's not just an environmental issue. It is a class issue. It's an issue that is based around like the whole way that we organize our production, our economy, our political system. And we're seeing that, like, people say that, like, oh, no socialist government has ever worked. Well, capitalism is destroying the planet and making it not livable anymore within like a very near time span. How is that rational? How can we say that is working if it is going to be the cause of so many extinctions, of this enormous ecological and humanitarian crisis? And like it's not working, right? And the way that production is organized, the fact that we are not able to take the steps that we need to do, like that in itself, I think is damning enough for us to say that we need something better, and we can have something better, right? We have everything that we need to do this. But we have to frame it. We have to frame it as a class question. We have to have a revolutionary program for the transformation of society. We can't. These demands are important, but if we just go to the current people in power and say that, like, oh, we want to talk with you, we want to have a seat at the table, we're kind of watering down our message, right? Because climate change is a political issue. So linking up with these antagonistic class forces, it waters down our movement's program, and it ultimately leads to a dead end because it just winds up confusing people. And then all that energy winds up being directed by those antagonistic class forces into things that continue to bolster the system and maybe tweak around the edges, but not actually solve the problem. And we talk about of course, all this talk about the Green New Deal lately, which promises a lot of which promises some changes in the way that our it's supposed to do a lot of these things for climate. But the problem is it's part of an empty vessel. It's kind of an empty vessel. A lot of right wing Republicans paint it like it's like the scariest, like authoritarian, and then right-wing Democrats, will say it's very progressive and then kind of use it for their own ends. But even in its ideal form, it amounts to kind of this Keynesian strategy of tweaking around the edges, trying to make the capitalist system work for the climate change that we're doing. But part of the thing too is if a true Green New Deal were to be passed, it would take so much political will. Why would we want to stop at that anyway? If we're able to muster the political will to put something so transformative, we might as well do what really needs to be done and address the root causes rather than just continuing to bolster the system that got us there in the first place. The only way to solve the climate crisis is for the working class to rise up and take control of the means of production of society in this revolutionary step. It's not something that can be done by reforms or tweaks around the edges. Let's see. So that kind of brings me to my last major point, which is on a revolutionary program for the climate crisis. So we see it really the only solution to actually remedy this crisis is to bring these polluting companies under ownership of the public, under this democratic control, as part of a rational plan of production, right? These enormous monopolies that do so much damage to the environment. Think of Exxon, think of Monsanto, right? These major polluters that are accountable to nobody. If they were nationalized, we can employ this technology, all these resources to actually do the opposite, right? To quickly slash these emissions, to transform production in a way that can still support all of the people and give them the best quality of life possible, but while also protecting the future of the planet and doing as best as we can to live in harmony with nature. Right? We could combine the best scientific minds and the skills of all the workers in the society for this democratic plan, and put our best technology in the service of humans and the planet, not dealing with these artificial barriers that are meant to maximize profit, rather than actually sharing our knowledge and growing it. there's really so much potential. There's so much that could be done, and in many ways we're very limited. So it's one of those things that, like, once we actually are able to tap into that, our potential will be so much greater than we could have even imagined. But until we do that, we're on a crash course for disaster, right? This is a very decisive, this is a fundamental question. And in order to be successful, the climate movement can't stand on its own. It has to link up with the workers' movement and all of these other struggles that we're pushing for, because it's all of these things are connected. We need a mass mobilization of workers and youth around clear socialist demands along transformation of society under this program that will actually put the power in people's control. Oh, hello, Mr. Yeager. That's my cat. He's wonderful. And really, because when the working class is mobilized together and organized around a clear revolutionary program, it's unstoppable. Think about who make everything in a society that we use every day. The people that run all the servers and all the farms is people like you and me. And together, when we're on the same page about this, we know what we're doing, and we flip that switch, things can change very quickly. I fully believe that we as the working class are capable of this. We just need that clear leadership. We need the theory. We need to be able to understand what needs to be done and how to organize and put the steps in there to do it. And that's kind of why we put out the socialist program. We have these talks in the first place, is to kind of both work on our own knowledge, to share it, to have these conversations, to deepen our understanding, and to really to agitate for class struggle and put forward the socialist program for climate change. Right? We're talking about nationalizing big energy, fossil fuel companies, and all the transmissions networks under democratic control, and provide mass investment in renewable energy, phasing out fossil fuels quickly while cutting prices for consumers, right? This isn't about making a bunch of money. It's about doing what needs to be done. Expropriating construction companies, taking the land into common ownership, and we can create new high-quality social housing using existing unused buildings. There's enough things to go around, and with our productive capacities under our actual power, then we can actually use it the way that will benefit people. We need to bring transport companies into public ownership, take business out of research in universities so that it can actually be done for the private good rather than public good, rather than private profits. I'm mixing up my words now. A good sign. I should wrap up here soon. So we need democratic control in these nationalized industries. It's about ownership and control and the way that society is organized and the power dynamics. Because fundamentally we come back to this question, right? Either the socialist transformation of society happens where we are able to take on this issue and we're able to do it together, and we're able to create a society that production and the way that society is organized is for the ability to continue to survive on the planet and live in harmony with the earth, and be able to, when we're producing things, it's for the good of everybody, right? It's not for private profit, but we're asking actually the question, like, what should be done? In climate change, this question, it's just summing up, just shows the urgency and just the singular, like the very powerful nature of this like class struggle and this class question. It is do or die for all of us. Capitalism can't save us from this climate catastrophe. It's created it, and it's shown that it's just the people in power are more than willing to do nothing or pretend like they're doing something, running around saying the earth is on fire with their hands flailing while knowingly not doing enough, right? And a lot of these new movements are encouraging, but we really need to take this to the next level and link up with the existing organized working class, and approach climate struggle as this revolutionary class question. The power already exists. We already have the power to do this. It just needs to be organized. We just need to, and that's the thing. It's not just a few people, right? It's all of us in our communities, talking to our friends, talking to our neighbors, talking to people in our workplace, spreading these ideas, and really deepening our own understanding, and building these organizations like the IMT that can bring these class questions to a larger and larger platform, so that we can become a point of reference in the class struggle, and bring climate, racial justice, imperialism, all of these issues into a focus, so that we can take decisive action and transform our society into one based not on private profit, but on the good of everyone. That is what we're fighting for. That's why I'm part of the IMT. And thank you so much for listening to me and coming to this talk. Yeah, that's all for me.
Thank you, Liam, for preparing that introduction for us tonight. And thanks also to Yvonne, who's been running the live stream tech. We're now going to move to Zoom for the group discussion. Posting the link now in the comments section. So please click on that link and join us to talk about the climate crisis and more about the socialist program and the Marxist perspective on how to tackle this enormous problem. Also, a quick note that our next event, the Wisconsin Idea Under Attack Against Austerity, a socialist program for the UW system, is in 2 weeks on Thursday, April 29th at 6 p.m. So we hope to see you there tonight at future events. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you soon.